The presenting sponsor of OnEducation is Participate. Lately, teachers from all over have been working together to find new approaches to provide quality remote education. Participate's sister company, Participate Learning, presents United We Teach, a global gathering place for educators to share distance learning resources as we navigate these strange times. For these resources and more, visit participate.com/oneducation.
What kind of psychopath gets coffee at 8 o'clock at night? Welcome to OnEducation, part of the On Podcast Media Network. My name is Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We will debate the implications of Trump's patriotic education, discuss why the presidential candidates are not talking about education, and our guests this week are educator and author Kyle Anderson and global education consultant Jennifer Geist.
We went from having no guests to two guests. And in
awesome.
fact, we're going to have two guests next week, too. So,
hey,
boy, oh boy.
We're making up for it.
It's all happening. Hey, by the way, go check out our Twitter page. Is that what you call what Twitter is?
Sure.
Go check out our Twitter feed. We just actually listed kind of the next month or so, month and a half's guests. And let me tell you, I mean, we've went through periods where we've had like just absolutely killer guests kind of nonstop. This is like the next 2 months are crazy. Crazy good. I'm so excited about the next couple months. We're booked basically solid until the end of the year. When you add in, the guests that we will we partner with FETC at the end of the year to work with them on some podcasts. So we'll get some guests, hopefully the keynoters and stuff like that for the conference. But we are more or less booked right until January. So my job here is done.
You just show up.
Right. Now all we need is $215 million. Like, hashtag segue.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
All that we need is $215 million like Kahoot just got. Holy crap.
It's so
That's a
crazy.
lot of money.
Well,
they're worth $2.2 billion. They are worth more than when Amazon bought Twitch. Amazon bought Twitch for $1 billion. Just for context, Kahoot is worth $2.2 billion now.
I mean, could you have ever imagined back in the beginning days of Kahoot that they would be worth that amount and they would be getting these huge investments to continue to basically build up the company? And they've proven me wrong. I always thought Kahoot was cheesy. It was okay. For what it did, it was as far as it being a take on a gamification game show. And I thought I actually for sure have said on this show, I know I have, that it's very limited, in what it actually can do, and that it can become,
may not be limited for long.
Yeah, I know. And if you use it too often, it can be like, it can just get redundant and not exciting anymore for the kids. But hell, I was wrong, because my goodness, they have got their stuff together to be able to go ahead and build the company up to this size. I mean, this is bigger than some learning management systems, Mike. This is bigger than the things that we think of as far as the things that have the huge infrastructure, that have all the different pieces that schools, almost at this time they have to invest in. This is an extra, an add-on, something else. And it must be through ad revenue, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of like Kahoots. I'm sure there maybe nowadays is a premium version that is available.
Like
that
a
you
licensing,
can purchase,
probably.
Right? Yeah, there's a licensed version of it. But there's also has to be some kind of...
They got to be making some sort of money. I don't know how, but... it's not just about the amount. The amount is huge. I mean, the amount is so big I can't even get the word amount out of my mouth. It's a giant amount of money. I can just imagine the things I would do with $215 million.
By a boat.
But buy a boat and sail it to the Caribbean like Jen Geist. That's what I'd do. Listen, $215 million is a lot of money, but SoftBank, which is the company that actually did the investment, they are a giant player in venture capital, like probably even close to the biggest, like up there with like Berkshire Hathaway and any of the other big players. SoftBank is a giant in this. So for them to be the ones that are giving Kahoot 250 buying in 9.7% of Kahoot for $215 million, and that's just, it says a lot. Like it might be worth $2.2 billion right now based on the valuation, but it's not going to stay at $2.2 billion for long. Not with that amount of money and who's involved in the investment. It says a lot. So, I mean, congratulations to Kahoot, I guess. I mean, it's just...
More than happy to start putting together some commercials for them for OnEducation if they want to go ahead and please reach out. Guys. Yo, Kahoot. Slide into those DMs, friends. I was thinking about this too, Mike. What are the implications, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, on other players in this space? You know what I mean? We've actually, had discussions about, GimKit, for example.
Yes.
And there's a whole bunch of other that are, maybe not exactly in the exact same space, but are players in this kind of game show, gamification elements, where review games, basically for kids. I was thinking about deck toys also. Quizzing, those kinds of things, Quizlet, Quizalize, those kinds of companies, or anybody else that's maybe thinking about starting one of these kind of things. It's got to legitimize, right? All of those, the whole space. It's got to legitimize the whole, that kind of side thing that people maybe got or maybe didn't buy as far as schools. It's legitimizing all of that.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who works for a digital learning platform, and that is part of this context as well, is that all digital learning platforms are experiencing some sort of growth. I can just, I would love, so I guess my initial thought had to do with Participate, because that's where I work.
Sure.
And this idea that, it would be lovely if a similar amount of attention was paid to the educator as it is to the student. So like Kahoot is student-facing, GimKit is student-facing, Quizlet student-facing,
sure.
Edmodo even is, student-facing. All of these things, all of these platforms that have gotten like fairly large investments are student-facing. But the reality is that a platform like Participate is educator facing, is a place where educators learn together and from each other and with the groups and partners that we work with. And it would be lovely to see some attention paid to that space as well. Because I think that just as much as we need to obviously focus on the students there, and I mean, you're going to hear us talk to Kyle, who is talking about, professional learning on, rolling out a new learning management system, and how some educators are feeling pretty overwhelmed at the moment with all of the initiatives and tools and services that they have to learn just to basically do their job remotely. And, a platform like Participate can help with that. And help your school district and whatever. So, I didn't mean this to delve into a bit of a commercial for Participate. But
I totally get what you're saying, though.
But I think it's part of the context.
Sure.
Of the, the one of the major growth sectors in education is is learning platforms. But most of the learning platforms that are getting attention right now are student facing. And, teachers need a little love in this. And I'll tell you, like I said, the things I do with $215 million blow your freaking minds. Trust me, please.
Talk about blowing your mind.
Oh God.
We didn't mention this because just so many things happened over
There's just so much going on.
over the last few weeks. But a few weeks ago,
Yes.
I think it came out in a tweet like everything else does as far as President Trump is concerned. And he put out this tweet about basically we need to change the way that education is done. And there was a lot of context here regarding
1619.
Black Lives Matter movement, the concepts of being able to discuss like what is going on in the world and why are we why are we where we are, basically, and then making sure that we have those honest conversations with our students. And kind of the flip side of that is this thing called patriotic education. And as I read through what patriotic education supposedly is, I was like, and I had a lot of conversations with educators, both on social media and, obviously within my school district too. And you can't help but to look at it and go, this is not patriotic education. This is like nationalism and things that aren't too far away from things that happened in Germany, previous to World War II. And I know you're an expert as far as those topics, but I was like, this is scary. That's all I could think of. That was my first initial thing as I read through the thing. I was like, it is interesting to go ahead and refer to it as patriotic, just like a lot of things these days are. If you don't do this, you're not patriotic, or so on and so forth. Kind of that's kind of what's even in the national politics. But this, just as you look through it, you were like, what the heck? This is so similar to Nazi Germany. And that's why I wanted to make sure I asked someone who actually knows some stuff about this. So what do you think about this? Yeah.
Do you know what Goodwin's Law is?
No, I probably should. I don't know.
Okay.
What is it?
No.
Yeah, tell me.
It's fine that you don't.
Okay.
So Goodwin's Law is the idea that in a conversation, usually online, something like a Reddit discussion or whatever, especially a heated Reddit discussion.
Okay.
It's that the longer the discussion goes, the probability increases of the eventual comparison to Nazis or Hitler. It's Goodwin's Law. You'll eventually get to Hitler. Okay.
So, but in this case, is that what's happening here?
In this case, I have never seen. I have fought so hard to avoid Goodwin's Law over the last 4 years. As someone that, like you've said, and I know a lot about this. I'm not a historian. I am not.
But you're passionate about this.
But I studied a lot of this, like way too much. And so, I see it. I've seen it tons of times. Even just like I hate even comparing like Stephen Miller to Goebbels. They look exactly the same. I mean, for God's sake, it's so crazy that I don't even understand it. But I've never seen more Nazi / fascist tendencies from the Trump administration than we've seen in the last 2 weeks. And it's come to the point where it's so hard not to delve into like Goodwin's Law territory. This patriotic education is so like SS material that it's not even funny.
No.
And when I had to I just went off the rails a couple days ago when he went up onto that balcony after he
Lord.
got back from the hospital and stood there, and like the comparison to Mussolini standing on his balcony, go look at the picture.
Yeah.
Of Mussolini standing on the balcony and his facial expressions and just the way he stood there, like, I own these people and this is my world and don't you dare, that's
freaky.
exactly what he looked like in almost every way. And it was jarring to me. And I'm not talking about this like, even though it's kind of funny. Goodwin's Law is a little bit tongue in cheek, but it was immediately the first thing I thought of. I saw that picture of Trump standing on the balcony, staring out over kind of his domain, ripping that mask off, and I saw Mussolini instantly, and I knew exactly the picture I was looking for, and I went and found it, and I posted it on, I can't remember if I posted it on Twitter, but I definitely posted it on Facebook. I'm a little more politically aggressive on Facebook than I am on Twitter, but not much, I mean, to be honest. But it was so clear, and I mean, this is nothing but a political, dog whistle.
Yes.
To rile up, I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know how much I want to say it. To rile up the South, to get the votes that he needs to get because he's desperate, because he's losing. His base is like 32 to 37%. And that's just not enough to win. No. The reason why he won in 2016 is undecideds who thought that his hard stance against like China, and they were convinced it was desperate white people with very little education, and there's lots of these in the United States, voting overwhelmingly for Trump when in 2012 and in 2008, they would have probably voted for Obama. And in 2020, it really looks like a lot of them are voting for Biden because they trust Biden.
Don't jinx us, though.
No, I mean, I'm also trying to not get into the prediction business, though I do look at 538 probably 15 times a day. And it's up to 86%. I mean, but I'm not, if when it was at 80-20, I said to Cheryl, 20%, it's 1 in 5.
Yeah, that's still a lot.
Just because someone has a 20% chance of winning does not mean 20% and 0 are very different.
Big time.
Obviously, I'm not a math guy or anything, but I don't know. 20%, 0%, big difference, right? That's my math. That's math with Mike. And so, no, I'm not, counting my chickens before they hatch or anything like that. But man, we've got to stop this. We need education.
Yes, we do.
In the world, but certainly in the West, more than we've ever, real, legitimate, truth-telling,
tell the whole story.
honest education more desperately than any time ever.
I was just thinking about too, Mike, because I know that in our interview at one point I think we get into Columbus Day just a little bit. But I was just thinking about that. There's this certain specific narrative that I grew up even with that was in our books, in our history books, and basically it painted a nice, I want to call it a nice picture of the history of our country, of the United States I'm talking about.
Sure.
And there's great moments, and then there's just some ugly things too. And it's good to go ahead and make sure you work through all of those things.
Yeah.
As an educator, especially, that you give all of those different truths, and that you have your students learn them, because otherwise then what ends up happening is that's what is currently the situation, which is a lot of people that don't even understand why there would be protests of Black Lives Matter. They don't understand that it was a pretty for a long period of time, and still continues to this day in the United States. It's really ugly for a lot of people, and I'm talking about a lot of our minorities, and so we need to talk about that, work through it, and then talk about how do we actually make this better for everyone, not just for some people, And what this patriotic education was, as it mentioned in this article several different times, is basically it wants to paint this specific one story, and it wants to tell this one story, this thread of story that really isn't the truth. It has some truths in it, but it isn't the truth, and it is definitely a nice story to tell if you want to continue basically justifying the way that things are. If you are privileged and you are living a good, decent life, whatever it might be, and you haven't had to go through these things and you don't want to learn any of those things, it's a great way to not have to teach your kids these things, for us to mention them at school and so on and so forth. So really ugly. I mean, as far as just the thought of a president saying, this is what this is the curriculum you're going to teach. It's like, wow, that's crazy ass stuff. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, Republicans for 20 years they've had this figured out in a lot of ways. They've not only have they worked incredibly hard to modify, own, control, dominate, the curriculum, the actual content. But at the very same time, they work very hard at undermining the structures and systems of education in the country.
For sure.
Through funding and services and social safety nets and stuff like that. So they're working it from both sides. Trust this curriculum, but let's destroy the system at the same time.
Ugh.
Okay. And they've been doing this very well since Reagan, to be honest. A lot of friends, if you don't believe me, I'm just a Canadian who knows way too much. But your problem started with Reagan, and even a little bit before that, but Reagan started this all, and it's been progressively worse ever since. But as much as so Trump talks about education because he wants to undermine, because a lot of educators are generally left, and he wants to undermine that.
Yes.
While also continuing to ensure he knows. Well, he might not know, because I'm not sure he knows anything, but his people know. The smart people in the Republican Party, and there are smart people that are Republicans, know that their primary voting bloc are non-college educated white people. And they want to keep people non-college educated. They're not like that's why they undermine the system, is because the less education you have, the less likely you are to veer left. Okay? And so, that's why Trump talks about education. And I just thank God every friggin' day that if Biden wins the presidency, the first lady of the United States is going to be a teacher.
Absolutely.
And that is I feel like that's monumental.
For sure.
It would be so exciting to have someone that's always got the ear of the president, and is always, that tweet that she sent last week about universal broadband just went all over the place, and I was so excited to see it. Where someone said, that universal broadband should be part of a platform. And Jill Biden was the one who weighed in, and she said, "I'm on it," is what she said. and she also said, "And I'm talking to Joe and he's listening." And to be able to that made me
It's huge.
have hope. And that's so exciting. It was the same excitement that I had thinking about, Chasten Buttigieg, if for somehow, had Pete won the nomination and then had won the presidency, Chasten Buttigieg is a school teacher.
Yes.
And that would have been monumental in so many ways. And so we have educators because, listen, if you didn't know, Pete Buttigieg is going to be a secretary of something in this administration. He's easily been one of their best pundits, advocates, whatever you want to call it. But, we are going to have educators in the administration. And that is just so exciting.
That's so important.
Exciting.
So exciting. There's an article that talked about, basically it said, why aren't the candidates, specifically the Democrats, we're talking about, talking more about education? Because Trump does bring up something about education all the time. Basically, his platform is this. It's this patriotic education, which was one of the things. But even before that, it's always been, we have to get all of the students back to school. That's actually part of his platform, I would say. If you listed the top 10 things that he says repeatedly, that is one of the things. It doesn't, that's a weird thing to run on, but that's one of the many things that I think riles people up, because they can see their kids are, a lot of kids are either doing a hybrid system or they're still doing a virtual learning because of the state of COVID. And so parents want their kids back. And so that's an easy sell, I guess. That's a good way to think of it. I now that you were speaking about Jill Biden and just the ability for someone to speak to the president that was an actual school teacher in a public school and understands the topics and understands and wants to make it better for everyone, as far as us in educators, that is fantastic. And I do wish that we talked more about what we should be doing as far as in education, talking about, the movement away from standardized testing, things like, what kinds of things do we have set up so that we have multiple ways of being able to enter career fields. I think Pete Buttigieg actually was one of the greatest, had one of the greatest ideas and plans as far as getting kids to just buy in civically to the United States. And so as far as being having a year of service after they graduate, whether it be in the Peace Corps, in the military, or some other type of thing, to be able to basically have us reinvest back into our country as young people. And when we do that, the thought is you care more about what's actually happening and you become civic minded. Just in general, like you've said before, Mike, as far as the teaching of civics in general and how we've not done a very good job of that as far as in the United States. And it shows. We just don't know a lot. We don't vote. A huge population doesn't even vote each election. And so just those types of things, I think the more that we push towards that, both on the national agenda, but then specifically because it's so influential, the state agendas and then obviously the local politics too, to make sure that we continue to put education as one of the top priorities of funding, of just what we actually are discussing, and making sure that we do the best thing for our students. That would be amazing.
Super exciting. Listen, friends, this is a big episode.
Yes.
When we come back, we will have Jennifer Geist from QFI, and then we will have educator Kyle Anderson. So stick with us. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Jennifer Geist is a global education consultant and curriculum developer. She collaborates with teachers, schools, and foundations to help them engage students in our time of tons of critical issues. Among her many partnerships is working with Qatar Foundation International. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
It's my pleasure. So, Jennifer, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners a little bit? Tell us a bit of your background and what brought you to us today.
Okay, great. Well, I'll start with what brought me here today. I think is my work with Participate, and I design a lot of the professional development that we offer, that QFI offers. QFI is Qatar Foundation International. The professional development opportunities that QFI offers on Participate are largely my design, and most of them, interestingly, are courses that I developed after having led programs for several years for QFI, where we were directly engaging with youth and really getting good at virtual exchange. And we had so much trial and error. QFI is like a laboratory for innovating. And we had I did 10 years of trial and error, and decided we made to make a shift, and instead of doing that sort of high touch programming where we were working directly with students, we decided let's take everything we learned and create some really cool courses for teachers who are interested in virtual exchange and really try to meet them where they're at. And so we offer this variety of courses that all grew out of our direct experience in our projects. But I started out back in I was a Spanish teacher up until about 2000, the year 2000. 2003. I left the classroom and I got involved with a Department of Education professional development grant that was teaching us way back then how to do online collaboration. And I've just been sort of on a vertical learning curve ever since, trying to keep up with technology and all the amazing things we can do now to connect internationally without getting on a plane.
That's amazing. I mean, so 2003, you've been basically talking about and working in kind of online, remote learning, distance learning, which is, everything that everyone's talking about right now since, 2003. There's obviously a lot of focus on this right now. And you've been doing it for years. So as with most people, I think COVID has caused a lot of reflection. A lot of people are just kind of thinking about their priors, about what they thought about online learning, about what they thought they knew. And, I heard someone say the other day that everything I thought I knew how to do is all wrong. And someone even said, I had all of these ideas about what I would do if I taught full-time online. And now that I'm doing basically full-time online teaching, I've realized I didn't have a clue what I was talking about, which is wild. I'm curious if your thoughts on remote learning, on online learning have evolved or changed, and kind of what are you thinking about now as kind of the world in a lot of places is all learning online?
Yeah, that is just such a great question for right now. And I've had so many conversations myself with different people about, what's happening for them. And really, I feel like we are all, my mom taught us when we made spaghetti, to take the spaghetti and throw it at the ceiling. And if it's stuck, then it was ready. And I always have this metaphor in my mind of like, you just throw everything up at the ceiling and see what sticks. And I feel like that's a place where a lot of people are right now.
I tell you, you know what's funny is that you probably haven't listened to OnEducation, but anyone who listens to OnEducation understands that metaphor completely because we've referenced throwing spaghetti against the wall probably every show the last couple of weeks. So, we're with you.
Oh, that's crazy. That is so funny.
Yeah,
it's
funny.
Really, that is really funny. Yeah. I do feel often like that's what we're doing. And
yes.
One of the beauties of this time, I think, is that what I'm witnessing amongst my colleagues and even amongst friends is we are so much more forgiving of each other because we all know that we're kind of out on a limb right now.
Yeah.
And we're all just doing the best we can. And with that grace also comes some latitude to be experimental and to try it, to throw it against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I think what I'm hearing is that really resonates with me is how personalized learning was really the flavor du jour, gaining a lot of traction in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I'm hearing from talking with my colleagues and friends is that keeping a personal connection it feels like the biggest challenge because you don't have that face-to-face contact and maybe you can't read body language and read moods the way you can when you have your students in your classroom. And also when you just come together on Zoom, you really have no idea what was going on for a person 15 minutes ago before they logged on. Whereas if you're in a school building, you kind of do have more of a sense of what someone's day is like.
Sure.
Now, given that, I feel like we are being asked to be a lot more empathetic and a lot more gracious and generous with each other, and that knowing that we really don't know what other people's experiences are. And I think that's making personalized learning really, really come to really flower in a way.
The irony, obviously, is that personalized learning used to just be framed around, the pedagogy in terms of like what they were actually learning, like the content. I'm going to personalize this content for you and this content for you and this content for you, and you're all going to get, and that was personalized learning. But now, I think, I love what you're saying is that personalized learning is we're talking about the whole person, and we're talking about the fact that, not every kid can have their camera on while they're in a Zoom call with their teacher because maybe their house is like, a disaster. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe they barely have a house and they just don't want, they have this one thing that the school gave them so that they can like, do online learning, but they're just ashamed of their surroundings, and that's real personalized learning. That's not just talking about the content. That's talking about the person, and the learner, context. and the teachers too, because I think there's a lot of talk about teachers and personalized. I don't know if we want to call it personalized teaching, but we're thinking about the whole person a little bit more, I think, right now.
Yeah, we're being forced to. I think that's one of the real beautiful upshots of the whole thing, and I like change personally, and I think change is good, and I think change really brings out the creative parts of us, and that those are my positive insights about what's going on, and I think this is all. I think we were going to experience a huge shift in education anyway with technology. I think we already have, and I think we're going to continue on this really kind of vertical trajectory here. But this really, really forced us all to kind of, I want to say up our ante, up to the ante, but I don't even think that's true. I think the stakes were always high in education because we have a huge responsibility, a social responsibility. But now, somehow we are, with these circumstances, we're really forced to ask ourselves, why do we educate? What's the purpose? And therefore, what do I need to do as a teacher or administrator or any kind of support, like I do support? What's most important, and what can I do to support that? You know, it's really gotten us back down to basics, I guess.
Yeah, super interesting. Jennifer, the United States in particular and the world in general is, and certainly I'm Canadian, and we're having these conversations in Canada as well, coming to a sort of a reckoning, is the word I've been using anyways, in terms of race and social justice. The conversation right now centers primarily around Black people of color, but I can't help but think back to the years immediately after 9/11 when there was a lot of anti-Arab racism going on. And not that that's gone away at all either. I'm a pretty strong believer in the power of community to change people's minds and help bring people together. And I'm curious about your thoughts around that. I know that you manage the QFI community, but maybe about just the power of, bringing people together that don't have shared knowledge and giving them that shared knowledge and that shared understanding is super powerful, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I feel like as I watch, what's going on right now with Black Lives Matter and definitely reckoning, that's a word I would use too. I definitely draw lots of parallels to what we've experienced over the years with Arabs and Islamophobia, and Muslims. Yeah. And, I had a conversation with someone who was sort of railing against Muslims, kind of fear-mongering, like how it was very shortly after 9/11, and it was well before I worked for QFI, and I had a couple of Arab friends, but not like I do now. And I can remember saying to that person, "Wow, how many Muslims do you know?" And the conversation was shut down. That was it. The conversation was over. And the person's face just went blank, like, oh, wow. They realized in that moment, I don't know a single Muslim. And here I am blaming this group of people and with really no basis. And so, to your point, like, if we know each other, we're not afraid of each other. I would say that is like 99.99% true. So the way to get to know each other, one way, is in community, right? And creating communities where people who are different can come together and get to know each other. That's another thing that can be challenging. Sometimes we get very siloed and we just hang out with like-minded people, whether it's race or religion or political, and then we get all stuck in our silos. We don't talk to anybody outside of our group, and then if things start to go sideways, you just look for a group to blame. It happens over and over and over again. Well, if we could blend, create more blended communities, it would just be so much less likely to even to take that step. We have a course on Participate called Aber. It means express yourself in Arabic. And it starts out talking about stereotyping and recognizing that, we start to stereotype because our human brains, we want to categorize and generalize. That's the first thing we want to do. And then next thing you know, you start stereotyping and lumping people together and thinking that all people who are like this are like, are the same. And then the course kind of, and the curriculum kind of walk you through how slippery a slope it is from that stereotyping to developing prejudices, and then discrimination, and just overt policies of discrimination. And
Wow.
And that's it's just sort of maybe one way of looking at this slippery slope. Well, if the course on Participate is about doing a virtual exchange between a classroom in North America and a classroom somewhere in the Middle East, and exploring that together and looking at how each classroom stereotypes each other, and then just walking through that, like, and just even looking at the process, but also that's sort of what's happening in curriculum-wise. But what's also happening is relationships are being developed. These students are getting to know each other. And that's the key part. They're developing community. And once you have that sort of a relationship like that with someone who was supposedly so different from you, I don't think there's any turning back.
It's funny. Friend of the pod, Noah Geisel, once on the podcast talked about language, and how language learning. And you were a Spanish teacher, so I think I imagine you understand this. And Glenn, who is our co-host on the podcast, another Spanish teacher. I'm surrounded by language teachers all the time, and I can barely speak the one that I know. But you know, I truly believe that language and learning a foreign language is a super powerful way to build community, develop empathy and understanding for other cultures, and gives you an appreciation of history. And I also think of my friend Franz Davis, and she got into BTS, the pop group BTS, the Korean pop group BTS, right. and she learned Korean so that she could be closer to that world. Oh, how cool. And that was her motivation for learning Korean, and I found that absolutely fascinating. And don't you think that language is another way that we can grow to appreciate other people's worlds and lives and cultures?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When I was a Spanish teacher, I can remember one of my students saying to me, wow, how come you're teaching us just a different word for everything? Why do we need another word for everything? And so for his, in his thinking, that's all there was to it, was you've got a cat and you've got a gato. And why do you need this other word that you have to use a different accent? You know, and I thought, wow, I have to do a much better job at fleshing this out for my students. That's how I got involved with virtual exchange. And I realized my students need to meet others, native speakers of this language, and they need to see, no, this unlocks a whole rich world to you if you can speak another language.
You could learn German, and then all of the words are just one long word.
That's right. That's
There's
right.
my language joke for the day. Nailed it. Right. I took a lot of history in my undergrad, and studied in particular, the Holocaust and Nazi Germany. So I am familiar with like super long words that are like 20 characters long. Anyways,
that's right.
Very, 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 very funny. So you've mentioned it a couple times, and obviously I work for Participate. All of our audience knows at this point that I work for Participate, so it's not like a secret or anything like that. But you have an awesome community there. What type of listener, so people who are listening, if we wanted them to think about whether they would like to kind of connect with you, join that community, and see what's going on there, what type of listener would be interested in checking out that content, and what type of learning opportunities do you think they would find there?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question, because the name of our community on Participate is Jusur to the Arab world. Jusur means a bridge. And in some ways that could lead, I could imagine someone glancing at the title of the community and thinking, well, I don't teach Arabic. I don't teach Arab studies. I don't really need that. And maybe pass it by. And, really, what, the community is about is building bridges across, cultures that are very different. Yes. And all of the really magical ways that we can do that. And so that's what we're invested in is bringing to light lots of different ideas for how that can be done. The biggie is virtual exchange, and we really are pros. Like, we offer a couple of virtual exchange courses, sort of an easy on-ramp, 101. 102 is a deep dive. And then we offer 5 other courses that are really about specific projects. And they're super well scaffolded, and they're also connected to the Sustainable Development Goals and the other sort of global work that we need to be doing right now, building bridges, connecting across difference to learn about each other and to learn how to work together, because we got to learn to work together. It's all about collaboration, right?
Yeah, no, that's the understatement of the century right there. Or at least the understatement of 2020, Jen.
For real. So, yeah. The other thing we're really into is multimedia and media literacy, which is a big topic right now. Just sort of helping teachers get the resources they need to specifically help students weed through and recognize good resources, find good resources for information, recognize truth and variations on truth, and also see bias and recognize bias that they come across in the incredible, fire hose of media that's coming at us every day.
Awesome. So, Jennifer, how can people connect with you personally? Where's the best place to reach out if they want to connect with you?
Oh, fantastic. Well, a really good way to connect with me is through the Jussur community. It's free. You just get a membership to participate. You join the Jussur community, and I'm on there every day. So messaging back and forth with me is super easy. And I also invite people to connect with me at Jen Geist at qfi.org, JENNGEIST at qfi.org. And I'm, awesome. I'm on there all the time too. That's one thing about working virtually is you work kind of 24/7.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so we will put the link to the QFI community in the show notes so that people can go there and check that out. Jennifer Geist, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
Total pleasure. Thank you, Mike.
Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Nevada educator Kyle Anderson is a veteran educator and the co-host of the Beer EDU podcast and the podcast by Sons of Technology. And you can now add author to the list of Kyle's accomplishments with the release of To the Edge, Successes and Failures Through Risk-Taking. Welcome to OnEducation, Kyle.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's an honor.
The honor is definitely all ours. Kyle, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us what brought you to us today?
So, yeah, like you said, my name is Kyle Anderson. I am currently a special education teacher, and I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. I've been teaching. This is my 16th year now. I taught for the first 11 years, I taught mostly social studies. It was U.S. history, AP U.S. history, government, things of that nature. And then I did a short stint as a technology coach. And then I was an administrator for a short time. Decided administration just wasn't my thing at that time in my life. The only job available when I wanted to get away from administration was a PE position. So I did that for a year. And then I actually moved from Las Vegas for a couple of years to Reno, Nevada. My wife was going to grad school in Reno. And when I moved up there, there weren't any jobs available except in special education. And first of all, I needed to get a job. And second, I had been the general ed side of co-teaching for several years, and I really enjoyed it. So I saw it as another opportunity to do something really cool. So I got a master's in special education, and now this is my third year teaching in special ed. And I'm kind of wondering why I didn't do this right from the beginning, because I really thoroughly enjoy special ed now.
That is pretty awesome. That's quite a journey of all of the different
The gambit. You've run the gambit.
You know, all the different types of roles in education, which is fantastic. So with your experiences, let's start the conversation by talking ed tech tools, specifically learning management systems. Your district, I believe, recently switched to Canvas. And so I was like, oh, I'd actually like to know more about that. What are your first impressions? And then I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. How hard is it to switch to a different LMS?
So I've been kind of a techie for a very long time. And the school I worked at in Las Vegas back in, I believe it was 2012 or 2013, one of my schools that I worked at was selected as a pilot school for, at the time, GAFE, Google Apps for Education. And I fell in love with it at that time and really got to know it well. Well, then when the district went and decided to go for the entire district, all 450 plus schools in our district, which where I'm at is the fifth largest district in the United States at well over 300,000 students. So they decided to go Google for the entire district after these pilot schools tried it out. Well, then I was in demand for helping train people on different Google tools, Drive and Gmail, apps and extensions, things of that nature. So that's when I found out I really enjoyed working with adult learners as well, was when we started getting into that. And that led me to the tech coach route for a short time when I did that. So I remember very distinctly going into the 2014-15 school year, I had tried a couple things in the past where I was doing assignments and activities using Google Calendar. Wasn't the best thing ever. And my district had kind of like a shell of teacher websites that was like my district's name apps or something like that. And again, it wasn't very robust, wasn't great. And I was looking for something to help get me going, to help just kind of digitize my class a little bit more, cut down on paper, and really just try to be more creative with what I was doing. And I get this email about a week before school starts from Google saying, try Google Classroom, this brand new platform that we're rolling out here starting next week. And my opinion was, you know what? It can't be worse than what I'm already doing. Let's give it a shot. And I fell in love with Google Classroom. And as it developed over time, it became even more robust. I mean, it's still not a full learning management system by any means, but it's still, if you look at what it was 6 years ago versus now, I like to call it feature deficient back then. Now it's a lot more robust than it once was. So I got used to that. And then this year we go into our new school year and the district announces we are no longer going to use Google Classroom. We are going to start using Canvas. And Canvas is something that I did a training on it a few years ago as a learner. And when I was looking at it, it was one of those deals where I can see where this is a great tool, but I'm already using Google Classroom. Why? What is going to make me want to switch to this? And it was a lot more cumbersome just posting assignments, let alone building anything else in it. And I kind of put it off and said, I don't want to do this because Google Classroom is something that is free. I already have it. I know how to use it. Move along. Well, then as time goes on, I take a handful of classes where as a student, I'm using Canvas and I'm seeing things on the student end and I'm realizing, wow, this is a really great tool. But once again, I don't have the time right now to really learn a new system in order to put stuff out to my students. And then on top of that, why, if all my students are using Google Classroom with all their other teachers, am I going to throw this curveball at them? But then all of a sudden, when my district announces that we're going to do Canvas this year, then it was all of a sudden, well, we have to do this. But luckily, because I am technologically proficient in a lot of areas, and I had a little bit of experience with it. The Canvas kind of came along quite easily to me. I mean, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm not sure I'd be comfortable enough saying that I could go out and lead Canvas trainings as like a Canvas expert or something like that. But when people have questions and they contact me, I usually can help them through it. Mm-hmm. And it was actually kind of funny. I moved back to Las Vegas a few months ago, right in the middle of quarantine, by the way, which moving in the middle of COVID-19, well, that was a nightmare.
Huh?
Oh, it was an absolute nightmare. The first time I set foot in my new place was the day I got the keys. I hadn't even seen it before I signed a lease. We did everything via video from 400 some miles away. It was not fun experience at all. But so the new school that I started working at, they asked me if I'd be part of the technology team because they had heard about my experiences. And then I had talked about that in my interview with the school as well. And when we get around to preparing Canvas trainings for the teachers at my school, I kind of got overlooked as they were assigning the different levels, and everything that was left was the expert level. And my assistant principal that was over top of it said, will you lead the expert ones? I go, you know what? I'll spend the weekend learning Canvas and I'll lead the expert one.
Doing
then.
it.
So, yeah. So
that's so awesome.
Yeah. So it's definitely been a transition for me. It hasn't been so bad because again, I've experienced in different tech tools, but
you're an expert.
Again, I don't want to say I'm an expert though, but I'm an expert according to that session I led at my school, right? But I can definitely see where there are a lot of people that are very frustrated. We're talking about people that they barely knew how to use Google Classroom, and now all of a sudden are learning this tool that is way more robust, but way more complicated at the same time to learn. And we were very fortunate where I'm at, where we had the first 2 weeks where we were supposed to have students, but we actually had training where we spent that whole 2 weeks learning how to use Canvas and building courses and different things, where I know there's districts out there that said, you're showing up on Thursday for your first day. Monday, you have students. You got to build what you can between now and then. And I was very fortunate that that was not the case. And I think a lot of teachers where I'm at are becoming more accustomed to Canvas, but there's still a lot of headaches and nightmares, and I'm sure tears coming from a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, learning a learning management system in the midst of a pandemic is not the ideal situation at all. It actually, the thing I thought of just a second ago was when we spoke a long time ago, probably 2 years ago, we spoke to Damon Torgerson from Alludo, and he talked about initiative overload, or the idea that educators can just get overwhelmed with professional development and new features and technologies that they have to just constantly be learning. And it can't be easy. It's not easy in the best of times. And this is by no means anywhere close to the best of times. If you haven't noticed at all. So I can imagine it's been difficult, but kudos to you for taking on, the expert role and owning it. So good on you. You tell, and it's funny because it leads right into this question. You tell a great story in your book about your evolution as a leader. And in particular, I love that you called out your mentors, your influences by name even, and reference them, some leaders in your life, in your career that pushed you to be a leader yourself. And you've talked about how you became a tech coach and even dabbled in administration. Talk a little bit maybe about, those folks that guided you, maybe if there's a commonality between them all, that pushed you to be a leader and helped you grow and develop as a leader yourself.
Absolutely. So just to back up a little bit, I just want to kind of highlight that going back to my early years as a student and even going into my years in college and whatnot, I didn't really think of myself as much of a leader. I wasn't necessarily a follower, but I didn't look at myself as somebody that people would come to for questions or issues or whatever. So that was something that it developed later on down the road. And when I mentioned people in my book like Glenda Getting and Tina Statuki and Ron Kamen, who were all administrators that I worked with, and I use the word with and not for, because a good leader, in my opinion, is someone that you work with and not for. Whereas 4 that's somebody that's giving you directives and expecting you to follow directions to what they envision. Whereas somebody that you work with is somebody that is giving you freedom to do things, freedom to make mistakes, and freedom to give you guidance and assurance that you're going to grow and get better at things. And Glenda, Tina, and Ron were just 3 of those people that's the common thing right there with those 3, is that they were people I worked with and not for. They were people that allowed me to try different things. And if I fell on my face, it was, okay, dust yourself off. Let's work on a different way of doing things. And Tina in particular was one that she really was checking in on me quite a bit. Not necessarily because she needed to, but because she genuinely cared about the people that she worked with and wanted them to be better. And she knew that by doing that, by pushing people, that meant that there's a good chance that you wouldn't be working with her for much longer. But her whole philosophy was, I would rather see you go off away from where I'm at and do great things versus stay stagnant with where you're at. So I really have to give a lot of credit to those 3 to not only what I am today as an educator, but really just writing the book in general, because I never thought this wasn't some sort of like bucket list thing that, you talk to some authors sometimes like, yeah, I always knew I wanted to write a book. This was something that really only developed in my head 3-4 years ago, that I wanted to write a book. And if it wasn't for those 3 and a lot of the other great leaders in my life, I never would have sat down and started writing this book.
It reminded me when I was reading through that that section on leadership, and in particular how you reflected on your leaders, on the mentors that you have worked with, that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of educators that'll go through their entire careers without any sense of affirmation, recognition, or relationships that push them to be better. And I can't help but reflect, and this isn't necessarily a question, but I wouldn't mind some thoughts on, how much better would the world of education be if every educator felt the way that you felt about the people that you worked with, if they felt the same affirmation and had that same mentoree experience that you had. Can you imagine?
Oh, it's mind blowing to think how much different education would be, because I also talk in my book about leaders, and I throw up air quotes on that, that were they were not good leaders. And I dreaded going to work on a daily basis. And, there's also the story in the book about the leader that I had when I lost my brother at the age of 25, who was in the Army, and the reaction that principal put my way when I notified him that my 25-year-old brother died suddenly. And I'll never forget that. I still, to this day, that was over 10 years ago, I still remember standing in his office with tears in my eyes and my voice and my hand shaking, talking about my brother and how I just learned that he died. And his reaction was not, I'm sorry, not what can I do for you? It was more of like well, I understand that you're probably going to a funeral. Just know that wherever you go and however long it takes, you only get 5 days bereavement. After that's non-paid.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. And to this day, like I'm getting a pit in my stomach right now just saying that, because I can't even imagine being so heartless to somebody about it. And then on top of that, the icing on the cake with that exchange was it was finals week and grades were due for report cards. And he topped it off with, make sure your grades are done before you go to the airport. And Jeez. I just, to this day, I don't know how I would react if I ever saw this person. No, I would like to think that I want to take the high road, but at the same time, though, like I said, I'm getting a little worked up about thinking about it right now, just because it was such a traumatizing experience. So, but the problem is that there are so many teachers that work for people like that, where they just there's no heart and for them as human beings. It's just about the job. And there's the people that are going to work every day miserable. And I mean, a friend of mine, even, she stayed at the same school for a long time because it was in a school that was it was in a low income neighborhood, a lot of crime in the neighborhood, gang activity, we had several students over the course of the years that I was there when I worked with her that died in violent encounters. And she stayed there for a very long time because she felt that if she left, she was letting down the kids. Yeah. And I completely understand that. But at the same time, though, when leadership at the school makes it that much harder for you to be there, you have to take care of yourself at some point as well.
Yes.
And it's something that I didn't realize until later on about taking care of myself. I had a long time where I struggled with depression quite a bit. And I talk about this in the book as well. And what really drove me to finally seek out help. And I'm in a much better place now. And I'm more conscious about taking care of myself. And even though this is not an ideal situation, the COVID situation that we're in now, I feel I'm in a better place than a lot of, say, colleagues and other educators around the world, because I have that skill set now, recognizing self-care, taking care of myself, and seeking out help when I need it, where that's a skill set that a lot of people, they just don't have. And it's only being exasperated because of the situation that we're in right now.
It's a perfect transition to this next question, because I just read your recent blog post, and you made a statement that I think will resonate with all educators right now at this moment in time. Basically, it says, teaching from my home in a 100% virtual environment has sapped any desire to do anything outside of my contracted schoolwork. And I can just see in the faces of my colleagues and the way that I feel and the way that my wife, who's also a teacher, and the conversations that we have, how accurate this statement is. And so you have set aside many items that you found passion in, working on your blog, obviously, Twitter chats, of virtual conferences. For those out there listening to this podcast, though, and I can tell that you do have an answer to this, can you see a light at the end of this COVID tunnel? And can you give us some, some inspiration to kind of say, you know what?
Give us some
dark
hope,
right
Anderson.
now.
We
It's
need some
dark.
hope.
But I can see something there at the end, because as I went to the end of your blog post, that's how it felt. It felt at the end like, you know what? There is a light at the end of the tunnel. I think you even write those words.
The thing that gives me the most hope right now is conversations I'm having with students. When you talk to students and they say, I really wish we were back at school. Yeah. That gives me hope. Does it mean that we're going to be back into a face-to-face environment soon? Where I'm at, I don't think so. Las Vegas is still a place where we're in a better place now than we were a couple of months ago, but the city of Las Vegas is still averaging several hundred cases a day. And a handful of deaths per day from COVID-19. The health department in Southern Nevada is still recommending that we stay at home for the time being, as much as people want to go back. And sure. I was just saying this to somebody the other day that prior to COVID-19, I was never a germaphobe, but I also didn't like large crowds unless it was on my terms. So I don't like going into like busy streets or busy stores, but I'll go to a concert where there's tons of people right on top of you because it's on my terms at that point. COVID-19 has really turned me into a germaphobe, for one. And then it is really, when I go into a store, when that person starts creeping into that bubble, I start getting visibly upset about it. And while I have not turned around and said anything necessarily to people, I have before said hey, you're a little close right now, but I haven't quote unquote gone off on somebody yet. But I had felt myself that anxiety creeping up at times as a result of this. But that being said, I will stay in the virtual environment and work from home as long as I have to, if it means that my family is safe. Okay. My health be damned, but my daughter, my son, and my wife, I don't want to go to school and expose myself to bring it home and expose them.
Yes.
So I will do it as long as I possibly have to. At the same time, though, that doesn't mean I have to like this situation. This is a miserable situation. It's awful. Students are not engaged the way they should be. Students are not participating the way they should be. Some teachers aren't engaged or participating the way they should be because this, for lack of a better way to say it, this sucks. Yes. And there's nothing we can do about it. So a good friend of mine, Brent Coley, on his podcast, Teaching Tales, said recently that very similar, but he said at the same time, though, try to find a silver lining to everything.
Yeah.
And right now, the silver lining is I get to see my kids all day, every day. And I have a friend who's out of work right now. His 2 kids are working from home on school as well. He brings his 2 kids here. We take care of ourselves. We, wash hands, do everything to prevent everything. But I get to see one of my best friends and his 2 kids and my 2 children all day at home. I didn't get that when we were in the regular environment. If I got to see one of my best friends once every 2 months prior to this, I was lucky. And now I get to see him every day, obviously being safe about things. So I do know that this will come to pass, whether that's next week, next month, or 3 years from now. I don't know. But eventually it will get better. And we're all going to be better for this, because you can't define adversity any better than the situation that we're all going through right now. And once we get through this, we're going to be that much better. Teachers are going to have the tools now to be better in the face-to-face environment. Snow days are a thing of the past, because now we can just do all this stuff from home. And I just, again, it's a dire situation every day. And it's terrible when government leadership around the country, around the world really, isn't taken as seriously as they should. But again, we're going to be better for this in the long run, and I'm looking forward to that. That's what brings me hope.
Kyle, we live in, I think it's an understatement, pretty polarized times. And this puts educators in a pretty tough spot. Obviously, educators have thoughts and opinions on society and, what's happening in the world right now. But it's also not hard to get in trouble for even the smallest comment in some districts. And that being said, I think that if there was a time to stand up and be heard, it might be now, in the wake of kind of especially the social justice kind of reckoning that Americans are facing related to race in the United States. So since we're talking a little bit about, risk taking, and your book is about risk taking, this feels like a risk that a lot of teachers are facing today. It is it's danger all around. When do you think standing up for social justice, for Black Lives Matter, and LGBTQ issues is more important? I'd love your thoughts on, this seems like one of those ultimate risks at a time that it's perilous, especially in a state like Nevada that is a kind of a purple state, in a lot of ways. I'd be interested in your take on this sort of thing.
Years ago, I remember when the unrest unfolded in Ferguson, Missouri after Michael Brown was murdered. I remember saying something on my social media feeds along the lines of enough is enough. I'm sick and tired of this happening. We need to be better. Something along those lines. I don't remember the exact words. And I remember somebody that I grew up near, a gentleman that was older than me. He was a state police officer in my hometown. And he responded to me basically calling me all sorts of names and calling me out, degrading me as a person over those thoughts. And it really made me not retract the statement. I didn't delete it from my social media, but it really made me hesitant to say something after that because of the way that this person made me feel. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to this summer with the murder of George Floyd. At this point, I said, no, enough is enough. And I don't care what people have to say at this point, because enough is enough. And it is time that things need to change. And when it comes to the protests that were happening, I am 100% in support of the protest that is happening, because again, it does have to change. And as a white man, I can definitely be better about the different things that I say, about the stereotypes and the biases that I have. And I have been actively trying to be better about those by reading, by talking to people of color in education, to those that are LGBTQ, just trying to learn more and be better. And I wouldn't say I'm necessarily the most outspoken person. I'm not necessarily on social media on the daily calling people out or posting things of that nature. But those things that are egregious that happen to come across my feed, I have found myself to be calling those things out a lot more. And then suddenly I'm not seeing that person on my feed anymore because I'm probably being blocked for calling them out. Or I have started to kind of weed out some of that toxicity out of my feed as well, because it's not only do I not want to associate myself with those kinds of things, but at the same time, though, when you just see that toxicity over and over again, it takes a toll on you, no matter how much you want to try to avoid it. So I have found myself in the past few months, not only becoming better by learning more and reading more and interacting more, but also by trying to actively take that toxicity out of my life through social media and other aspects of my life as well. So it is a risk. You know, you are risking, especially as an educator. You may work in a district where you're told that you cannot display a Black Lives Matter emblem on, say, a profile picture or talk about these things with your students. But I'm also in the mindset that I would much rather ask for forgiveness later on. And even then, though, my forgiveness isn't going to be like, I'm so sorry. It's going to be, why aren't we allowed to do this? I'm going to question it even further, because these are things that have to happen. And most recently, we had Columbus Day here in the United States, which is a concept that is very controversial because of the impact that Columbus had on the world. And then also just the outright myths regarding his legacy in the world. And just actively trying to work to teach in a way that is more truthful and more, what's the word I'm looking for here? Brutally honest is what we're looking for here, where you want to talk about Columbus, quote unquote, discovering America. First of all, he never set foot in America. And second of all, he basically showed up and enslaved a population of people that had no idea that Europeans existed. And those that didn't comply, they were ravaged by disease and practically wiped off the face of the earth as a result of that. And that's the brutal truth that a lot of people just don't see. And it's about trying to be better to spread those brutal truths versus just keeping up with the status quo and trying to stay in the middle as much as possible. Now, I'm not necessarily a person that enjoys controversy and getting into arguments or whatever, but if it's egregious, I'm definitely going to call it out. And I don't really care about what that reaction is going to be, because I'd rather fight for what's right than what's popular.
For sure. So, Kyle, how can people connect with you online to continue the conversation, or even can you direct us to the book and being able to purchase that?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. So you can find me on Twitter at Anderson EdTech, and then I'm also on Instagram at the same thing. My book has an Instagram at To The Edge EDU. And the book can be found on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And then thank you to EduMatch Publishing, who gave me the opportunity to publish To The Edge, Successes and Failures Through Risk Taking. So you can find it on those platforms. And then my writing, I try to write on a regular basis on my blog. But as I mentioned in my last blog that you brought to the attention, Glenn, haven't been writing as much lately, but AndersonEdTech.net is where I write at. And it's a lot of education, a little bit of my life. Sometimes I get snarky about politics and pop culture and stuff. And I love to write. I have a lot of fun with it. I've been going strong with it for over 5 years. And I just, like I said, I just don't have as much time to write right now. But I can be found at any of those places.
Listen, if Americans were smart, they would just, instead of doing Columbus Day, they would just have Thanksgiving like we did.
Hey, you know what? I had a friend in college that was from Canada. I got 2 Thanksgivings one year when his parents came into town.
That's a win right there.
They hijacked my kitchen in my apartment for the entire day. When I came back from football practice, there was a Thanksgiving dinner waiting for me in October, and it was amazing.
That's how you do it. Kyle Anderson, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Glenn Irvin. My co-host is Mike Washburn. OnEducation is part of the On Podcast Media Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting onpodcastmedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website, oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at oneducationpod. Mike is at Mr. Washburn on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at Spanish. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/oneducationpod. We're also on Instagram at oneducationpod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you shared it with them. Please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Participate, for supporting us. Check out participate.com to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening, stay awesome, and see you soon.